This is Jesse Hensley.
This is Josh Turner.
And this is Chris Bow.
Welcome to Turn Down for What?
Welcome back to Turn Down for What? It's the new year. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year's.
Hello.
So, we have Jesse Hensley back, and the wonderful Chris Bow, and myself, Josh Turner. And today we're kind of just going to continue a dialogue that we've kind of began to touch on, but then just kind of discussing some charging station variables about, some recent testing that Chris was able to do. But then we were also personally all dialoguing around a few different variables with charging stations and distances and EV sales. And I figured we would just kind of bring that conversation to you, the listener. So kind of picking up where we were discussing before we came online. But, we were basically just kind of summarizing one. Chris, if you want to talk about the sales numbers and kind of how that's reflective of the
You forgot the first thing we were talking about. So, somebody has a new toy.
I do have a new toy.
I want
We'll start
everybody
there,
to
then
go
we'll go there.
look at what he made, because I was like Josh scrolling through and I saw it and I was like, well, that is fancy. I don't know who did that, but that is great. I've never seen it before. And then it turns out it was you. So what did you end up getting for Christmas?
Yeah, a little gift to myself. This great group out here with the Tesla Owners Club, East Bay, has a guy, Tony Pham, and he does the Quick Bandit front license plate holders, which are really awesome. In California, you're required to have a front license plate. The front end of a Tesla isn't really designed well to have that, and you got to drill into the bumper. It's a real pain. Some people have done stickers. Well, he made this awesome attachment that literally clips on so you can hold your front license plate and then pull it off. So, you could try to get away with, telling the police, oh, yeah, it's in my trunk right here. Sorry, I was just getting the car washed and took it off, and pop it right on, maybe avoid a fix-it ticket, or if you just don't want to put holes in your Tesla. So that's what he did. He designs these things, and he's also done a bunch of signs and amazing creative work. And there's a shop nearby called EV Mod. This guy, Larry, that owns a shop and does a lot of mods for EVs, especially the Teslas. And so Tony did a sign for him, and I'm like, man, I would love to have a logo. We were talking just now with Josh about, what if we had like a turn down for what sign or something. Well, I wanted a sign for when I do the EV events that I do for the Ford, for the Lightning Club, here in the Bay Area, because a lot of people don't know about it, and we got this logo now. And hey, if I'm at an event, how do I display that and get people to kind of join the Facebook group for the Bay Area Lightning Club? And I said, well, I'd like to have a sign with the logo. And so we're over at EV Mod talking to Tony and Larry and bantering ideas and kind of telling what I was looking for. And then we looked at the frunk space, and they make this thing called the What the Frunk for the Tesla that he's done a couple times. So we just kind of start bantering ideas, and Larry's like, man, you should make one for that Lightning. And I literally give him the lid, that removable lid off the sub frunk where the cooler is. He takes it, scans it, measures it, designs it, and takes the logo from the club, and we go ideas back and forth, adding speakers and all these different things. And so, yeah, it's got now with this little frunk insert that goes right into the cooler space, has a couple speakers, an amplifier, an LED controller that works on Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. And I can use it for when I'm in an event. I could play, music. I could play our podcasts. And then the center logo is also with 4 screws. It can be changed out. So if the Bay Area Lightning Club evolves into a Northern California EV club or a Model E club as T3 and other Ford, products come online, I can maintain it and swap that branding out. So really just cool little toy that I wanted. I've been to these EV events before, and you open up that big, vast, dark space that is the Lightning Frunk, and man, I wanted something inside to make it pop and something fun and stand out. And I think that did it. So I've had a lot of fun with it.
Well, if you're listening or watching, go on to Chris Bow's Facebook page. You can follow him on any of the platforms and look, because it's a very fun, cool system. I wanted one. I was scrolling through, like I said, I was just scrolling through, and I looked, and I was like, holy cow, that is so legit. And I looked, I was like, wait, it's Chris Bow. What? And the LED lighting is just cool. The speaker, it's a unique way to use that front dead space, which honestly, I've never used. It's just sitting there. And so having something like that, just a kind of a cool take on, being able to, especially at those events, just to have a showpiece as a cool little option. On yours, it looks like you just plugged it into the Pro Power right there. That's right available, connected, correct?
Yep, and that's one of the great things about the Lightning is I can literally just plug it right in there. And it's powered up, and it if the outlet cover is lifted, it'll tell you, hey, it's lifted. Do you want to power it? Yes or no. You can also just reach inside. There's that little button you can just press, and it powers the thing up. So it's really convenient. A lot of EVs don't have the power up front, so it's really convenient that it does. So I've got everything plugged into a power strip, and then the power strip, the single cable straight to that outlet in the front. So it really worked out well, and it's a heck of a lot of fun to have. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the next events where I can kind of unveil it.
Statement piece. That's a really cool one, and I'll have to
Yeah.
figure out, maybe get one with the turn down for what logo right there on the front and center. That's
Right.
pretty darn cool. But yeah, check that on socials if you haven't seen it. That's a really cool, unique use case for the, I guess, is it the ice? I mean, like, it's like the cooler storage.
Yeah.
I don't know what you label that part of the frunk. I think it's intended to be a cooler because that's a little draining and stuff. But I've
Yeah.
I've I've used it one time to store like jumper cables and stick them down there. But it's like, that's about the best I've done with it.
Yeah.
Um,
I had my mobile charger and my adapters in there and a first aid kit. And I just moved them to the under seat storage of the rear seats. So they're just sitting under there now. So
does it
one
take up the entire compartment, or do you have some dead space underneath it?
It pretty much does. I mean, there's some dead space there, where I have, like, for example, the power strip and that stuff, and there is still some air underneath it and dead space, but not enough to really put much under there. I mean, I could throw a couple adapters or something in there if I want. Maybe the coming Tesla to the NAX to CCS adapter I could pop in there with a little Velcro to hold it in place, not let it slip around. So there's some dead space, but the other thing is it's designed well with this little cutout on the side. I can easily lift it and take it out anytime I needed to. So
Hmm.
that's really convenient as well. And I've thought about maybe getting hooks and hanging it on the wall of my garage when I'm not using it or something. And it plugs in so you can take it anywhere. It's a mobile. Yeah,
It'll just be
it's
it'll be a little frunk shaped
right.
wall mounted sub, like a speaker system. So
Yeah. Shout out Tony for just an amazing design and his creativity and just taking a very vague idea and running with it, and a lot of fun seeing it popped in there. Did it at a Tesla meetup, actually, was where it was unveiled. At a Taco Bell, we had a Taco Bell meetup, Taco Bell Cantina out here. It's a Taco Bell with a full bar. I swear to you, full bar at the Taco Bell, and they're like a bunch
now
of
that
Tesla
seems
meetup.
dangerous. That
Yeah,
seems dangerous.
yeah. So
A
it was
Taco Bell with a full bar. It's like every time anybody goes to the bar, they want to go to the Taco Bell afterwards. But put the two together, that's a lethal combo.
yeah, I don't know if that's a California thing, but we've got a couple of these like Taco Bell cantinas out here. So drop us a note in the comments if you have them in your area.
Jesse, was it downtown Nashville, or was it Ontario? Not Ontario, Toronto, that had that Taco Bell with a bar. I think it was Nashville.
I think Nashville. Yeah.
But they had a Taco Bell, but it was like a walk-in Taco Bell in the middle of downtown, and they had a display for some specialized alcoholic beverages in downtown Nashville. But
And it's weird. I had a week of Taco Bell, so I had the event with Tesla and unveiling the what the frunk at a Taco Bell, and then the charging testing I was doing also at a at a Taco Bell. So very strange week
look at you
hanging
with
out at Taco
another
Bell.
really excellent segue. I mean, you're just nailing the segue game recently. Uh, but
Uh,
segueing into the next point that we were talking about was, I called you the moment that you were doing it, but
yeah.
you were able to go through, and you're partnered with a newer charging station company that's doing some infrastructure installation. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, so they've got three locations in the Bay Area. One is right here in Newark, which is the city that I work in. So that made it really convenient. They're really close by. Then they have one in South San Francisco, and they have one, I believe they're making up in the North Bay across the Golden Gate Bridge there in Marin County. I believe it's going to be in Rohnert Park. So um, yeah, that's where they just kind of reached out to me one day, and we kind of just talked a little bit back and forth, and so I was like, yeah, I'm happy to help. Like, I love this stuff. I really don't need to charge DC fast charging. I've almost never do. But it's so close, and frankly, it was fun to just be a part of testing something. And I knew they had the tritium chargers, which were the same chargers that you guys are looking at out there in Tennessee. So kind of my first experience with that. So yeah, I was like, yeah, let me do it. And so I went down there. And I also really liked just their kind of concept of a business model where they're putting it next to, in this case, they have an agreement with Taco Bell. And so I thought that was really smart because it's certainly in the parking lot, even though the agreement was with Taco Bell, there was a Starbucks right there, a Little Caesars right there, a Chinese restaurant right there. And I think those kind of amenities are important and missing in some of the ones that you drive up to in the middle of a random Walmart somewhere.
That's
So I
one
thought
of, I
that was
mean, we are not California here in Tennessee, and that's one of the biggest things that we've had issue with is like, me and Jesse take a road trip to Nashville for the meetings that we've been having, and we would get to a charging stop, which is a Sam's Club parking lot at, 7 a.m. Because we're traveling early, and Sam's Club's closed.
yeah.
And the nearest by amenity is half a mile to a gas station. And if you're stopping and let's say like a traditional traveler, you want to use the restroom, we had to go bum a hotel lobby restroom because that's the only thing that's available. Because Sam's Club's not open yet, and so if you want a snack, you're walking half a mile down the road to the gas station. And during the day, sure, it's fine, but what happens to the people that need to refuel at midnight? And there were people that needed to refuel at 7 a.m. Because Sam's open at like 11 or something. Um, and so the practicality of having stations that offer amenities, I mean, that's one of the things that you're seeing with the Nevi releases across nationwide is that they're really incentivizing those that offer amenities to the consumer because the current network isn't really catered to the driver when it comes to those things, which is frustrating as an EV driver myself. The last thing I want to do is be on a road trip and stop somewhere and have to walk 200 yards across a rainy Walmart parking lot to go into a Walmart to use the bathroom. It makes sense to offer amenities like a gas station that you're covered, you're not going to be out in the elements, and that seems like what the incentives that are going out will provide. But similar to what you're seeing there, I mean, putting it amidst several restaurants and things just means that when a driver stops and they have to charge for 20, 30 minutes at a fast charger, they actually have something to eat, something to do, grab a coffee. I mean, that's huge. So definitely
Yeah.
something that is a huge win for EV drivers.
Yeah, this group is called ChargeNet, and the thing that I thought was most unique is they have this app where whatever partner they're working with can incentivize you to then go inside. In this case of Taco Bell, you might have coupons or deals or loyalty or different things that will partner with them.
How do you
So
discount a $1 burrito? That's my question.
Hey, yeah, right. They might have, yeah. I don't know. I didn't. We're just kind of working on the app integration, the starting, the stopping, all that stuff with the charging. So that's what we were testing out. I haven't seen kind of some of the coupons or deals or how that would work or the membership deal, but conceptually, I thought it was an interesting business model. They have the solar canopy that produces power, which I thought was interesting.
It did
No.
seem like it was a little bit leaky, though.
Yeah, it definitely was. So I was like, wow, it was funny because the biggest feedback definitely like, right off the bat, wow, that's a leaky canopy. And for me, it's perspective. For me, I'm like, wow, I don't ever see canopies. So I was like, oh,
It's
excited, a
better than
canopy.
being all the way out in the rain for sure.
Yeah, and being a bald-headed white guy, like my first thought was the sun, and I'm like, oh, this is great. And then, funny enough, like as we're testing, it just starts raining, and I'm like, oh wow, yeah, there's definitely leaky points to this. It wasn't sealed, there wasn't. So yeah, I'd love to talk to them more. I'm sure I'll get some more opportunity with ChargeNet to test something else in the future and see. I don't know the details or what they're willing to share, but is that the cost of making a solid canopy? I don't know. I had another guy reach out on LinkedIn who does. solid canopy covers and stuff. And maybe we get him on the show one day, and you guys. And I'd love to get Brandon Flash, who did stuff with Circle K and now's moved on to other things. And man, we just have a whole DC fast charging conversation, because you got Tesla coming out with their adapters. I'm really curious the strategy, the way the funding works. This place, for example, only had 75 kilowatt chargers in place, and I know they're expandable, but that doesn't even qualify for NEVI. So they didn't fund it that way. I know they've got other locations that do have the 150s, and yours are going to have the 150s. I mean,
or bigger. We may
bigger.
be going to the 400s. We're talking. So
yeah.
I mean, the issue that we deal with, and this is just on a larger note in regards to the generalized health. And Jessie and I were actually talking about this the other day. You've seen that there's a sag in the companies that rely on EV charging station sales solely, which a company like Tritium, is struggling when it comes to the financials. One, because it's the beginning curve of the EV, manufacturing, boom when it comes to those things. But two, the most successful people in this industry right now are those that have EV infrastructure as an addendum onto their portfolio. So like Lincoln Welders, who's done welders for years and years and years and years, came out with a charging station. Well, if they don't sell charging stations, their business isn't going to go belly up. They just have that as an add-on with the technology that they've built. SK Signet's another provider that we've looked at, and they have all sorts of additional infrastructure outside of just charging stations. But Tritium is based out of Australia, and the reason we chose them, one, we got to tour their facility. It's very impressive out of Lebanon, Tennessee. But the issue that they deal with is, they only deal with charging station. I think they did a large investment. They were, featured at the White House, and Biden spotlighted them. And but they did a large investment in Tennessee to bring infrastructure into the United States, I believe specifically for this NEVI release. And so they made a Buy America compliant unit. But what we found was in pricing, I think that they have a slow unit. The minimum federal requirement's 150, but a lot of these companies, even like the Circle K type networks and things through what's the network, Pilot, through EVgo and things like that. They're getting 180s, and so they're not 150s, but they're faster. So the points get allotted better towards the 180s, and the cost is actually better for the 180s than with the Tritium units that we were seeing. And so it's made it to where it's kind of an issue when it comes to generalized health of in our opinions, their business structure. But the 150 units are made very well. You got to use a very similar system. I think it's the smaller, based on the photos. I believe it's just this. When I went back and looked at it, when I called you, I thought it was the 150s, but looking back, I think that is actually just their 75 PKM unit, which doesn't have to meet the Buy America compliance. So for cost, it's less. But that's something that with their infrastructure, that I think that's why their sole reliant income is based on charging sales. And they've won Hawaii. They won several stations in Hawaii, but they've not done any other NEVI based awards. And so that's an interesting kind of paradigm to be in when it comes to, if you're only making money off of charging sales and charging sales aren't happening when it comes to the NEVI release, then you're kind of one bucket of funds that you're missing out on. And that really, I think, does affect things overall. But the big indicator of that is their stock value was around $1 billion a year ago. And now it's worth, what was it, Jessie? 30 million?
Wow.
something
Yeah.
like that. I mean, it's gone down like 90+%.
I'm gonna take
Which a
myself
lot of
off
that's
mute. Yeah, it's in the 40s. And again, that ain't the value of the company. There's a lot of
Yeah.
other things that goes into that.
I'm talking
But it
about
does
stock
show.
valuation strictly.
Yeah.
That's not their
And,
company
and they're not the
valuation,
only
but
one that is suffering either. I mean, when you look at ChargePoint, they've went through a CEO now. They've got rid of a lot of the board members as a result of the same situation, where I believe that the diversification has not been there. And then things like what you're talking about with this ChargeNet group. I mean, I'm looking on their website.
man, I really like their design, and their business model is completely different than our business model. But yet,
Different
when you
approach,
add
right?
them both, it's going to be great because they're not spending that high money to get that 350 kVW delivered to the vehicle. You can do these smaller stations, but you're going to have about the same money coming in. So you strategically place those systems to where if somebody's going to stop in that shopping center to say go into Best Buy or whatever for 30 minutes or whatever it is, I'm gonna charge up. I'm gonna go do that. So they're gonna have my business regardless because of that. And though you're only looking what 650, 700 or 70 volt, that's still not enough to really have to have a lot of specialized electrical equipment going to the site. So you're still under a good budget there. I would say you could probably get what, Josh, everything out for around 100,000 for one of those. Everything's said and done.
Yeah.
So,
And
and then
the electrical infrastructure for those type of units are going to be a lot less than the higher powered units, which do play a factor. But tying into the point that I was making, I mean, Tritium was down. I think their stock value was, like I said, up towards a billion, and they went down to something like 30 billion. But I mean, even ChargePoint, which is one of the largest United States based providers, their stock in February of last year was at 12 per share, and now it last check on January 2nd, which is today, is $2.20. So I mean
They're
that's
also
down.
they're also different though, and just in terms of the way they approach it. So like ChargePoint, a lot of those ChargePoint locations are independently owned and operated, almost like a
Yep.
franchise model,
Mm-hmm.
whereas you know, Electrify America is different, EVgo is different. The Flying J that I've seen out there with pull-through chargers and a big canopy looks really cool. Um, ChargePoint, I've seen it like the airports. I've seen them at hospitals a lot. And they also do home units. So they're really that's a totally one approach to it. And then with ChargeNet, the app integration is cool. And I got to feel I don't know. I would love to talk to them more about their vision for it, but it felt more like this is what locals use. This is what people in town are using because if I'm on the highway and I need to pull off and charge, I'm seeking out a 350. I'm seeking a 350 because I know that a 150 is not going to give me 150.
Yeah.
Like I'm seeking out the 350 because that's going to give me the 170 and keep my charge curve in the hundreds all the way to 80%. I need the 350. So at a 75, I'm probably not seeking that out. And there is an EVgo and a Electrify America closer to the highway than this one is. This one's very much, supporting, a business area and a residential area and a shopping center. And it's really close to a mall. There's a really big mall just right across the street from it as well. So
And I
kind of
think
convenient.
that ties into the point that I was talking to you on the phone with. There's different use cases for the
Yeah.
highway traveler. They may care about that, but the use case of having a business model for people that are going to stop somewhere for 30, 45 minutes is where those less than 100 kW units make a lot more sense because it's a top off rather than I expect to get refueled at this location, because a 50 kilowatt, 75 kilowatt delivered charge is never going to be the future of the industry if that's the primary source. If I'm on a road trip and I'm stopping somewhere to get 75, it's going to take almost 2 hours to charge my truck. That's not practical. I mean, like you're saying, on a road trip when you're driving long distance, you're going to want those 350 units. But
Yeah.
if you're going to the mall to grab a change of clothes or whatever, then I mean, all of a sudden you can plug up while you're there, and 75 kilowatts in the 1 hour it takes you to go shop. Oh, now you're getting 50% battery life while you were just doing what you were going to do in your regular life. And so
Yeah. I mean,
that's when the high level 2, low level 3, how they classify it, networks really make a lot of sense there.
to your point, we tested. They have 6 of them, and so I started at one and kind of tested. He plugged in, made it initiate the charge. Remotely stopped it. All these types of different things in the test. Started at around 40% battery state of charge, and then as I got to the end of it, they let me just keep it plugged in and kind of charge the rest of the way. And then I literally went into the Taco Bell, grabbed some dinner, and by the time I ordered it, ate it, caught up on some social media posts and read my email, I came out and the truck was at literally as I walked out the door had just stopped at 90%. Um, And that's normally you would only go to 80%, but I let it go to 90. And yeah, it was ready to go. And so in the amount of time that you'd be at the Taco Bell or the Little Caesars or the Starbucks or the Chinese restaurant for dinner, and you pop out and you almost don't want it to be at a high stated charge where it's done in 20 minutes, because
Yeah.
then you're getting idle fees, then you're in somebody's way.
Yeah.
So there's a sweet spot depending on where it's going. Really interesting stuff. Also, I know you would maybe be able to give some insight into this. When you're connected, whatever your peak draw is, don't you get certain penalties or certain amount of money you have to pay on top for the grid if you're pulling above a certain amount?
That
I
might
don't,
be
I
the
don't,
case on your grid. I mean, on our side,
Not yet.
within our region, but I mean, that's all subject to change because these power providers can do whatever they want to do.
Well, that
But
kind of hits our uniqueness too, because we are looking at doing power production at our facilities, and whether it be hydrogen fuel cell, whether it be solar, whether it be battery backup that we can then do the distribution, whether the power goes up or down won't have an effect on what we sell our product for. What we produce it for is what we're going to sell it for if it's cheaper than what the surrounding options are. Now, we're not going to do that at first, but that is our goal as we look forward. And again, our model is going to be completely different than a lot of people's because of that. What I really like about systems like this is it doesn't qualify for the NEVI on round one through, say, Tennessee's round one NEVI, but it could qualify for, say, round two. So when you're looking at level two options that would be going around these places, here is a 75 kilowatt charger that probably splits off into 35 or 37 and a half and 37 and a half if you're doing two cars at one time. That's going to be a very good option to put downtown cities or to put at your convention centers when you're going to have people, or your parking
and
garages that stay full.
and what I've discussed in the past is, I mean, I think that there's a different use case for every charging style, and the goal for long term EV adoption and use is having the appropriate level charges anywhere you go. I think every hotel in the United States needs to have a level two slow charger, meaning that I can plug in when I get to that hotel at 5 p.m. And then the next morning, when I want to take off at 7 a.m. after getting my continental breakfast, I've gotten my full charge and I'm ready to go. And I think every hotel has a use case for a level two. Now, a situation like a shopping mall where people are going for an hour or two, a slow level two that's delivering, let's say, 10 kilowatts an hour, that's not really delivering anything meaningful other than what you call a sip, in that regard. But
You're not going to make any money on that either.
and that's where a system similar to what you're seeing there at your Taco Bell may make sense. So I can go and it's a meaningful, I'm intending to be here for 2 hours. And so the use case of a convention center, of a shopping mall for not, I mean, it's 75, I believe per classifications is a level three. I would consider that a low end level three. I think that the terms need to be changed in the near future. Where like 150 is a base level three, but a 75 logistically is a level three. However, I think that's a very practical use case for shopping malls and things where people intend to be there for 2 hours. But parking garages for like places of employment, apartment complexes, all of the hotels all deserve level twos. Long term parking at an airport might want a level two. Short term parking might want a low level three. So I mean, I think everywhere that you go, there's a different use case. But all the highway corridors and like your traditional gas stations along the interstates, I believe, should have your 350, 400 high powered units, because the objective on road trips is not to stop for 2 hours. In the road trips I've taken, 15 to 20 minutes would be excellent. It's usually 30, 45. But, getting those stops under 30 minutes is the objective. But then filling out everywhere else you go with a slow charger makes perfect sense. I went to
Yeah.
Disney with my truck last year, and the park had a slow charger. Well, I plugged up, and you get an idle fee if it overcharges. So I don't want a 75 if I'm in the park for 12 hours, but it sipped the power and then I didn't have a fee because I was basically sipping it while I was at that charger. And so every location will have a different use case, but shopping malls, and things like that, like this system you tested out, would make a perfect sense, in my opinion, for a 75.
Yeah, whether at the 49er games, we have a Santa Clara parking garage that has a bunch of, level 2 style EV chargers there. The 49ers at their gate C entrance have some level 2s. And then oddly, I park in a parking garage that's connected to the Hilton right there across from the stadium. And they used to have level 2s, and they used to have a big DC EV Go charger. And they removed them. I emailed them and I was like, well, I just thought that was such a backwards thing to do. And I don't know why they removed them. I used to love plugging in and going into the game and coming out with a relatively full charge for my drive home. And yeah, now I don't have that. And I don't have access to the parking garage that has them with my parking pass. So the one that I had the parking pass for, they literally just a few weeks ago, I walked, they still have the chargers there, and they've pulled all of them. So it's interesting, these kind of adjustments that people are making, whether it's the charging or manufacturing and production, and people trying to find that equilibrium, right? Of where's the right spot? Am I ramping up too fast? Do I need to pull back? Is it making money? Is it not making money? But this was the kind of a lower level side area of the parking garage. It didn't seem like it was anybody's way, and I was shocked that they pulled the chargers out of there. So, got on the website and gave them feedback, but they're not gonna listen to me and put them back in. But I did leave it there.
And that kind of ties into the last point about your charging experience, was, the fact that several of the heads were damaged. I mean, it could be one of those things we've
Two of them,
seen
yeah.
happened a lot, where there's vandalism and things like that associated. And that's something that, obviously, how to maintain security of those stations. I mean, obviously you can use camera systems and things to keep those things safe, but
Then you're
I've
just
seen several.
witnessing. You're like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
great. Now I get to see the person that just.
yeah,
I get that with like my porch pirates, right? When I have my camera and I'm like, someone stole my kids' coloring books and bed sheets. Who does this? Who are these awful people?
yeah.
Um, and I can now witness it, and it almost made it more painful. I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh man, I want to get this. I want to get this guy's face. I'm gonna blow up a big sign. I'll put it in front of my house. Do you know this guy? Like, who
Yeah.
steals?" It was funny because I posted on Nextdoor. Somebody stole my wife's cane. My wife had mobility needs and needed a new hip surgery, and ordered a cane. Someone stole the cane. I'm like, "Who steals a cane?" And it was funny because I posted the picture off my camera on Nextdoor, and a couple days later the cane reappeared on the porch. Anyway, off topic tangent, it made me think about that with the cameras.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
so, I
you
mean, like,
got to be careful coming on people's property around here trying to steal stuff. They don't really care too much
East
about
Tennessee,
it.
East Tennessee is a little different than California. We'll
Yeah,
just put it that way.
Dude, this
But
guy, this
easier to
guy,
dig a hole.
he walks up. Not only does he steal the package, we have this porch. This, like, it's not really a porch. We don't have porches, but it's like a front yard swing in front of our. We have a peach tree and a front yard kind of like, seat that can swing a little bit. And the guy literally steals the cane, eats our peaches, sits on the swing, and then leaves. I mean, who does this, right? I mean, it's
that's blatant. That's blatant. That's blatant robbery right there. They're
right,
coming at you and just mocking you while they're
right.
at it.
Oh my God, the crazy world we live in, guys.
There was a, this is the tangent that we're on, but there was a video of somebody that went into somebody's garage and stole a package, but there was a dog there, and they sat there and pet the dog for a second on camera, and then took off, and then they eventually got arrested and all that. But like the person stopped to be kind to the dog, stole the package, and left. But
Oh,
yeah, gotta love it. But
yes.
but yeah, so I mean, obviously, charging stations are coming. I think that there's a use case for all different types and sorts, and the every station provider. I was curious the efficiency. I've only ever gotten to use a Tritium charging station one time, and it was at their facility when we toured it, and it was reliable. I mean, it delivered what was promised, but it wasn't high power. So I don't know how they
Yeah.
perform on high power, but I guess that's one we could determine.
The one I
Um,
was one I was using was giving me just over 68 on a 75. So I mean, it's certainly in the
That's
ballpark.
good.
Yeah, I mean,
And
that's not horrible. I mean, if it promises delivery and you're getting close to that peak, then that's a solid thing for that use case.
Yep.
the company name that you were talking about is ChargeNet. And if you want to find their app, it's actually ChargeNet Stations. For
Yeah.
those that are looking for it, it's a little green. It's on a white heading,
If
some
you're
white
in and
lines
around the
in it.
San Fran area,
Yeah, it's just in
Definitely
the
cool
Bay
concept.
Area.
Like it.
I'm sure they'll be expanding it, at some point, probably to Southern California as well. But I know right now there's just the two active and a third coming to the Marin County area.
yeah. Hopefully, we can get them on the podcast at some point and talk about their infrastructure too. So
Yeah.
but yeah, so I mean that's kind of some interesting takes on the actual charging infrastructure as it comes, and I mean we will actually find out hopefully this week in regards to our infrastructure in Tennessee. So there could be next week an announcement on the podcast in regards to those developments.
Yeah.
But something that we're working on. So, anyways, anything else we should talk about today?
Yeah, I think the last topic was just that kind of idea. I was at our local Ford dealer last week talking about them installing their level 2 chargers, or I'm sorry, their level 3 chargers. And showing them the what the frunk, of course, like, hey, you guys got to check this out. And
Shout out to episode 1, Turn Down for What, was called What the Frunk.
What the
Anyways.
frunk? Yeah, it's yeah, I was at the dealer and just talking to him. I was getting the recall items, the light bar and tray and all that stuff done. And just looking at their inventory of Mach E's, and they had a couple F-150s, and just that conversation of kind of, they have that narrative out there of people saying, hey, Ford is cutting production in half or whatever. And I'm like, that's not true. That's not what happened, and it's kind of a great headline. And I just know, looking back at kind of the evolution of the Lightning when it was first getting launched, their initial kind of plans were in the tens of thousands. Like, hey, we're going to make tens of thousands of these Lightnings. We're going to have a shift out there doing this. And then when they realized how many pre-orders were there, they updated the goal to like in that 80,000 a year mark. And as the momentum and COVID and dealer markups were going crazy, it seemed like it would never end, right? And so all these different places started, all these different manufacturers had these great plans of, we're going to go all electric by 2030 and all these different things. And then Ford literally earlier this year stopped production and kind of realigned the line to get a 3-shift 150,000 truck production possibility going. And that was kind of the vision, was, wow, this thing could really take off. We could do 150,000 of these. And then that turned out to be wildly, overly optimistic, right? And so they pulled back from that. They said, hey, we're not targeting 150 anymore. We're targeting 80. Well, 80 compared
was their
to what
original was
their
double
second.
their original target. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And so, if they're anywhere, if they just do 75,000 a year, that's triple of what they've done either of the last 2 years, right? And so, yeah, if they actually can hit and produce 75 somewhere in that area, 1,000 Lightnings, then they will have year over year 300% growth in the Lightning, and someone's gonna say that's cutting in half production of the Lightning. I mean, that, some guy in a cubicle had an imaginary vision of what it might do, and now, because it's going to do triple and not 6 times or whatever. That's just funny to me, that kind of idea. And then
And
just
you really don't know until it hits the market and
right.
you start getting actual orders. And I mean, obviously they saw a huge demand around the Pro XLT, trims and things, but that's something that they're able to now make some educated guesses. And I think that the EV game is the long play. It's not something that you're going to see a million sales, unlike Tesla. You're not going to see a million sales of Lightning anytime soon. But you set yourself up for success by putting in infrastructure that's going to get you consistency in sales, and then you work on growing it and developing it. And as the charging networks improve and as consumer confidence improves, those sales numbers will improve. But that's something that, I mean, the long play of them actually making that pivot now versus in 2 years when they have a surplus and they're head scratching over inventory and budget concerns. It's a smart business move to keep an eye on your sales and to adjust accordingly. And nobody, when you're coming into the space with a brand new option, like we had discussed in times past, that Lightning was the first of its kind. You had Rivian that had come out with their truck, but like the first full size F-150, you could be all optimistic and you can think the world of it, but you have no idea what that's really going to do outside of educated assumptions. And so for them to then see huge pre-orders and to increase would make sense, but then to see lesser sales number than the optimistic numbers and to scale back to realistic, really good targeted goals isn't a negative. That just means that they're a smart company and they're following their numbers, and you lead with revenue. I mean, you sell what you can. They're still have their infrastructure investments. They're still working on T3. They're still doing all these other things.
Yeah.
But Lightning sales, if they're at 75K a year and that's what they can produce and sell, then great. And
Well,
if they get to 100K, great. But that's
here's
up
the
to
way
them
I
to
see it.
determine.
They have made a product that, in my eyes, is better than the other trucks that I've driven. Now, I'm a Ford guy. I've always had F-150s. I've had several F-150s in my life. We've had junk ones that we bought from the auction and used as work trucks, the old square bodies we would get. That was our truck to go to. I had a relationship with Ford many, many years ago where I would drive, I would race cars, and I was a Ford guy. We our family business had F9 or had Ford 9000 with the Cummins in it for dump trucks. Dad would always get one. We'd fix it up 77 or higher. We'd get rid of it or use it and then sell it for a profit. So I've always been into Ford, and that makes it hard for what I say to kind of come over as between from a non-biased person, but I've had zero problems, major problems. The light bar in the back, I think everybody's had a problem with. Unfortunately, I think that's made in Tennessee. So, hopefully we'll get that worked on.
We went to one of the counties and we met with the regional leadership. They're like, "Is that a Lightning?" They're like, "Did you know the rear light bar was made in our county?" I was like,
That's funny.
Had no clue.
And then about 3 weeks later, it's like, oh, mine's leaking.
There's a recall. Like, well.
But I've had no problems with mine. It is everything that I thought it would be. It is better in some aspects than what I thought it would be. It's ease and it's drivability. It's comfort. It's just a really good truck. And for somebody to come out with that right off the bat with no competition yet. I mean, there is no full-size truck that is competing against. And when you start looking at the numbers, I'm going to be excited for my Cybertruck to get here. And yes, the beast mode has all these things, but when you compare it to, the F-150 like it is with the standard, our trucks are not that far off from what that one is. And it's took 4 years to build that. And in some ways, ours has better designs than what it does. It's just not as flashy, and it doesn't have that wow factor in it. So I think they've done a great job, and I think it's going to continue to grow and probably be like the F-150s, all the standard F-150s. I think the Lightning will stay as the dominant truck that you're going to see on the roads. You're going to have Chevy, you're going to have Dodge, you're going to have Teslas, but you're going to see more work trucks that are in everybody's cities. You're going to see more of that truck on the road than you ever will the other ones, probably by double or triple.
You saw, Jesse, today, you saw a Lightning that was being used by a local, one of our national parks.
My national park here. Yeah. So it's I think it's going to be the truck everybody goes to. I really do.
Yeah, I think one, you can't put a what the frunk in a Tesla. You can't power it. So or in the Cybertruck anyway. You got to power it differently. But so right off the bat, the Lightning's a better choice for your what the frunk needs. But when I was at that dealer, they had a bunch of PG&E hybrid F-150s all lined up. And I asked the general manager, I was like, why aren't those Lightnings? He's like, I just can't get enough. Like they would buy every Lightning I could get if I could, and those are all Lightning Pros for local utility company. Like I would love, again, I don't know the back end numbers of them, right? But man, if Ford could ramp up those Pros and XLTs, there is a market
for them.
They would
sell 100,000 of those, I bet.
Yeah, if they can get them at the right price point, right? National parks, local police departments, utilities, all these places, and there's definitely a value in a fleet, the fleet software, and all of the different things they can do on the Pro side of Ford. There's a lot of value there, and I think the question is, I will never admit it or never tell someone like me, or anybody publicly, but I bet I'd love to get somebody with a cocktail or two in them and find out, like, did they do the math and say, hey, if I made 100,000 of these pros, I can't, no matter what the scale is, I can't make the math work. And
So
so they're like,
Farley, if you're listening, we're taking you out to cocktails and trying to learn everything
yeah,
from you. Thank you.
find out his favorite drink and try to get the inside baseball on it because
Yeah.
I always thought if they could get above 150, if they could get to scale, the cost per item, cost per unit is going to come down to where it makes money. And it just
It's
makes me
economy of
wonder.
scale, and they have to get quantity. I mean, that's what Tesla's done, and that's why their
Yep.
vehicles have been able to decrease. But it's something I think Ford will get there. It's just they have to get a baseline established and then start working on improving numbers, getting profit margins established, and then they're able to edit from there. But that's just it's a
Tesla
process thing.
Tesla just released their numbers today. It was like almost 500,000 this last quarter, 1.8 million EVs. I think BYD was a little bit behind them at 1.6 on the EV side. So if you look at them, those are the two value drivers, right? If you're looking at EVs, BYD and Tesla are the ones that are getting a lot of value for the dollar of what they're delivering in an EV vehicle, and that's
I would
because
love to have a BYE, the hatchback that has like a 250-mile range. I think you could get that thing for around $18,000 in Europe. Would
yeah,
love to try that out because that's
they're
just extremely cheap. And I'd like to see what they've done to it because it's past their crash regulation. So it's not like it couldn't come here. But for that kind of money and price point for 250 miles would be, great for pushing the I just honestly think that some of the problem is we just don't have the charging stations yet, and they're coming, but they're not yet to really support. You see Tesla had to build their own,
right.
and we're still waiting. There's been times I've sent Josh pictures when I'm going up back from DC where I'm waiting in line for 30 minutes waiting for somebody to move out. And if that's today, imagine when you double or triple those numbers for the same
Yeah.
roads. So I really do think that the charging network needs to go in place to where you have them every 50 miles or so. And that's coming next year. Next year, by the end of next year, you're probably going to see a good half of the nation is going to have most of those charging stations in
And
place.
our repeated theme that we've had on this podcast is affordability and charging network. I think charging network will lead to quantity of sales, which will help with affordability. But
That's a
that's
very good
something that
point.
those two things alone will help drastically drive it. If there's a ton of charging infrastructure, you can charge quickly, which was the third thing was speed of charging. But if you can charge quickly, there's a ton of charging stations available. And the cost of the vehicle is the same or equivalent to gas powered, and all the tangible savings from it, then there's a lot better use case practically for the average consumer. Whereas, a lot of people, everybody I, speak with and my day to day is like, well, I'll bring my gas powered vehicle and tow you to the charging station. And it's like, it is what it is. But when the consumer confidence improves, you'll see sales numbers kind of rally around that. It's just it's chicken and the egg, and there's a lot going to happen. But 3 years from now, there'll be a different conversation around charging availability, and I think also affordability will begin to become a factor at the 3 year mark from now, where we're going to see a lot of those prices come into play when it comes to affordability. There's be competition because more vehicle people are going to be in, so that drives figures down. But also there'll be more options. BYD type companies may be coming in, and I mean it'll open up the network for a lot more consumers to afford a vehicle.
BYD scares me, man. Like I think, they're looking at opening up a factory in Mexico. Tesla's looking at Mexico. When those things start to hit the US shores, I mean, the US consumer will buy the value.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter where it's made. If it's brought in and it's value and it's, the whole Walmart is the juggernaut of bringing in Chinese things, right? That and Amazon, the amount of stuff you see that comes over in containers out here on the West Coast, Oakland, Los Angeles, Long Beach. I mean, container ships filled with stuff coming in from China. So not going to be any different with EVs, man. If these OEMs don't get on board, I think Ford is the closest of the legacy OEMs to be there,
Yeah.
and Stellantis is just struggling, and GM seems to be struggling. And as an American consumer, like I really hope that we get on top of this because I think their hesitancy it could definitely
Will
hurt
cost them.
getting it's going to cost them. So
Well,
I
Stellantis
really,
right now, I'm worried about all together. All their vehicles are having a
right.
problem. So, so that's one. Of course, that's an Italian-owned maker now, even though their brands are here. But I 100% agree with you. Not saying that electric's going to take over, but today's issues we're having is today's issues. I do charge my truck here at the house and save a lot of money from driving a standard truck. I save a lot of money every day. Is that going to create more problems? Yes, but that just means there's more opportunities to fix those problems. There is going to be solar panels that's going to be affordable once that market gets growing. And if China is bringing that stuff in legally through different means and the battery tech, that's one of the areas that we look at is large scale battery storage. And the cost between what I can get from there per megawatt versus trying to even source it ourselves and even do the construction in the US is so far off, times 3 or 4 of what we can do it for ourselves, that how can you not do that? And that's just on those batteries. It's the same price when you're doing car batteries as well. So they're going to have a big advantage.
Everything in the industry we've looked at, chargers about a third of the cost than it is to be made in the United States. Solar panels, about half the cost as it costs, maybe a little bit less than half the cost to make it out of China. So I mean, that's something that we have to figure out, that piece of it to become competitive, because that does pose a viable threat, as far as the future of any industry, when it comes to those things. But through different tariffs and things, obviously they control the inflow, and the value coming out of some of those places like China. But that's a very viable thing to have in concept when it comes to the large OEMs trying to produce vehicles at an affordable rate.
And China props up their EV manufacturing industry quite a bit, and they've had incentives. And it was interesting because at the end of this past year, 2023, a lot of the Chinese incentives went away for a period, and they're looking to bring them back here in 2024. But you'll notice the price of batteries and the lithium and all that stuff, the market, it dipped. It's some of the lowest pricing year over year, comparing end of 22 to end of 23, because a lot of those Chinese government funds kind of went away, and now the government's talking about bringing them back again. So that market is so fluid, and so that's one of those things where I just think that there's a holistic energy solution. Because for my house, end of the year, I just did my summary that I posted as well. 11 kilowatts produced, 11 kilowatts used. I mean, I think it was 65 kilowatts difference, that I produced 65 kilowatts more than I used between my home electric and my lightning. And so that was in California, where the rates are incredibly high. That was $4,500 in electric savings and $2,000 in gas savings. That's quite a bit of money, right? And so that's my solution as a homeowner in a single family home. But now you've got people in apartments and people in high rises, people in big city areas, and that's where you start talking, Josh, like we were talking about, where you need those level 2 chargers at hotels, at shopping malls, at everywhere that you go, at work, at apartment complexes. And then you've got those ones in between that are the 75 kilowatts, and then you've got those on the highway that are the 350s and 400s. And it's going to take this whole, so you need battery storage, you're going to need solar, you're going to need wind. I frankly would love to see electric go nuclear. We've got one single nuclear plant in the entire state of California, and I know people recoil against nuclear sometimes with the risk of it. Japan had their problems and just had an earthquake and tsunami recently that kind of harkens back to the risk of nuclear. But I just think that, the entire country of France is on nuclear. And I'm not saying that we can do that, but man, a mix of fossil fuels, hydrogen.
It's an efficient source, and I mean that's something that Tennessee has those, but it takes a while to get those modular reactors set up and things. But there's multiple solutions for generation. I mean, you can't be strictly reliant on one, as it's been shown when it comes to different clean energies, at least. But I mean, you can't rely on wind energy, but it's a supplement. You can't rely strictly even on hydroelectric. I mean, our whole network mostly is provided through hydroelectric, but it's not enough. And so, I mean, you have to have these supplemental things such as solar, such as hydrogen, such as nuclear, as a basically holistic, approach to bringing in all these different energy sources. But that's something that logistically, there's going to be improvements down that space. Solar panels become more efficient. Wind energy will become more efficient. Hydrogen will become a factor when it comes to energy generation. So all of these variables coming together, our Tennessee will have, I think, is it Jesse? Is it two modular reactors coming in 10 years, roughly? You're on mute again.
So, I mean, even last week, it looks like the Clinch River project, which is the Clinch River Breeder Reactor project. That's in Roane County. We've been through Roane doing some of our projects. They visited the site for one of the new SMRs that's coming to Tennessee. I believe they'll be doing small modular reactors, like 10 of them is what was planned not too long ago. But this one is a site that's been selected and they're going through the regulations for that. So TVA is definitely jumping on the front end of this. I know that our Governor Lee, did set aside $50 million in this year's budget for companies that are supporting the SMR push. So it's something that I believe people understand that it needs to happen. And the difference, obviously, we'll go into an episode of this later, but with a small modular reactor, the SMRs, it takes a lot of the Fukushima style problems and it eliminates them. This is basically the same thing that you've had on nuclear warships. It's not as productive, but it's able to even use waste material in order to create its power. So there's a lot of positives about it. And now that power is getting to the cost and to the damage that it is in some areas, it's something that it is a viable tool now to be able to be used. So Tennessee seems to be one of the places that's really pushing hard. Anderson County, that's up there in Anderson when we went up that area. So it's definitely with Hitachi and I think GE is working with Hitachi on that one. So can't wait to see that happen. Like you said, you need more of them. If you're going to take away the ones, you at least got to supply something for the back end of it. And that's the problem. They've not supplied let's get off of this, but okay, go to what? Let's do it. I'm for it. Tell me how.
Yeah, it's like they cut all of our in TVA's 7-state district. They cut pretty much all the coal out of generation because a lot of energy, even in West Virginia, it still remains such. But I mean, they've cut in our TVA zone all of the coal out. But we had last year rolling blackouts because they couldn't supply enough power through the hydro and other initiatives that they have. And so that's where there needs to be additional supplemental energy by whatever it means. And I think they're trying to cut natural gas production too, but that's where solar and hydrogen and some of these other factors can play a role in it until these nuclear things come online in 10 years.
That was a big factor for me with getting the lightning was the rolling blackouts and the power safety shutoffs and the things they were doing here in California. And you have to have a diversified energy plan because you're talking about, hydro. When we were going through our drought years, there was a period we were perilously close to not having enough water coming down through the Colorado River and through some of the different streams and things that were going to these hydro plants. They were going to have to turn off the plants and lose that power because there just wasn't going to be enough water flow. And then we got a couple back-to-back really strong winters that got us back on track, but it was really close to shutting those off. And we've got big wind farms here at the Altamont Pass, and there's times where the wind, of course, doesn't blow. And then solar, you get this huge duck curve where if you don't have battery storage, there's parts during the day that we have so much solar power in the state that we literally have to give it away or have people buy it from the state because there's too much over generation and not enough demand. And then you get to that end of the day period where everybody goes home, turns on their air conditioners, the sun is going down.
You're buying energy from the surrounding states.
Right. It's a tough balance. Yeah. You need, and we are using a lot of natural gas plants. That's kind of the big California plants are the natural gas ones. And so just the one nuclear, I think we have one coal still left somewhere. But for the most part, it's natural gas, a whole lot of solar, needing to have the battery to help that duck curve. And as supply and demand, if we've learned anything from COVID, right, and inflation and supply and demand, if we pump all these EV cars out there and all this charging and we don't generate electricity for it, then pretty soon that delta is gonna go away unless you're someone like, that has the solar at home and the stuff like that, where I'm inflation protected, which was one of the big parts of that investment for me. The higher the rates go, the better my return on investment is in a strange way. But, for the future, if we don't have a better supply and we keep increasing our demand, it's gonna be really tough. You're gonna end up with that delta disappearing, and suddenly electricity rates, not just for vehicles, are going to even out, but then everybody's homes and businesses, everything, it trickles. So energy is important, and so I love hearing that they're doing that in Tennessee, and hopefully that's an example for others to follow.
Well, and it also
Yeah,
gets to the virtual power plant. That's where you're losing that solar in the middle of the day. What if you had, a lot of different battery operated devices, gadgets that have bidirectional systems built in to where you can supply it and then release it to where even when they're giving it, they might give it to you. Then when you buy it at the end of the day, it'll be a cheaper buy. So say your truck, they fill it up for free, knowing that they can't put it nowhere, and then that night they'll say, look, we'll give it to you. Can we buy it off of you now for cheaper than we're buying it from other states? Sure, you can give me something for free and then you'll give me money to buy it off of me later. Now, all of a sudden, you're going to have, forklifts that are battery operated that can go on the grid. You're going to have all these different machines that potentially could be, storage systems for the state's energy level, and
if
all of
they
that
can figure
involves
out
the system.
if they can figure out vehicle to grid, I mean that's a instead of having to have battery farms, which is just tons of extra battery storage. I don't know. I can Google it right now, but whatever the California EV vehicle count is, if you think about the number of, they're saying there's 903,000 registered vehicles, I believe, that are EVs in the state. So if you took a million vehicles at 100 kilowatts average, which is high, but I mean that's a ton of storage. That if you utilize that system and had an incentive, however that looked like, with vehicle to grid, then instead of having to have 12 battery farms, you can literally just use the vehicles on the road and be able to have an accessible power in those high demand times.
Well, I'd love to see Tesla kind of do what they did for vehicle to grid, vehicle to home, vehicle to X, whatever you want to call it, and do for that what they did with NACS. I mean, they essentially just kind of cult of personality their way into calling it the North American charging standard and said, I'm going to call it this, and this is what it is, and should all get on board. Ford got on board, a bunch of people followed after that, and suddenly, it's actually
Volkswagen
Volkswagen
is finally
just
did.
recently,
Yep.
yes. And in fact, it is now a legitimately certified standard. And it's, a year or two after they declared it such. So the wheels of government grind so hard, so slow, so annoyingly slow, and big corporate, so annoyingly slow. And Tesla's just like, you know what, we're going to call it this, we're going to do this. And I hope they do the same thing with this vehicle to X stuff, because what they're doing with the Cybertruck is awesome, where you just basically have a gateway. And if you've already got a power wall, you've already got one, but otherwise they'll sell you a gateway for, $1,200 and you plug in. But that's a unique, to their universal wall connector. But that's unique to Tesla right now. I'd love to see them open it up that where I can do that with my Lightning. I've got a gateway for my power wall. We have a virtual power plant here in California that I get paid about $300 a year for some of the energy I give back during those grid events, and it outproduces, for the limited time that it's being used, it outproduces the nuclear power plant we have here when we do that, just the Tesla Powerwall parts. And my local utility does have something with the Lightning where they can use the Lightning battery for that, but then I'm using that home integration system. I have to have the home integration system, and it doesn't incorporate in with my solar. It doesn't incorporate and play well with my Powerwall, and I've got to pay $10,000 to $13,000 to have it installed, and that's just a deal breaker for me. And they give me like a $4,000 incentive to help pay for some of that, but it just, when I looked at it, it made no sense at all. And that is in a nutshell, right? Like almost the EV world, where you've got the legacy folks of Sunrun and Ford coming up with a $10,000 to $13,000 solution And then you've got Tesla coming up with one that's $2,000, right? A $1,200 gateway and a $600 universal wall charger. And if that doesn't epitomize everything that is the marketplace, right? The OEMs have got to get on board with this type of elegant, simple solution. And of course, the first one they put out is a $10,000 one. First one Tesla puts out is a $2,000 one. I mean, that in a microcosm is the story.
And if you get
There
the
needs to be a
Cybertruck,
lot
they
of
pay for it too. They pay for it,
Yeah.
have it installed. So,
and
Yeah.
there's going to be a lot of developments down that space that I think we conceptualize these things and they're going to happen, but it's like you said, it's a slow moving wheel. But the handshakes between power companies and vehicles and solar and all of these things are so new that we got to figure out the most efficient way to have those communications take place, because it's a huge opportunity to benefit not only ourselves but the community that we live in, and supply strength to the grid as in general. But it's just a matter of getting all those pieces in play to make it make sense. But that's something that we can obviously continue to have dialogues on, and more, definitely more to come on that. So, but
Standardization is important for this stuff.
yeah. Well, we're running at the hour mark, so we probably should
Good way to
call
start
it
the
a
year.
day.
Yeah.
Good conversation. A lot more to come. Excited to see where Turn Down for Watt takes us this year. It was a fun first year trying to get it up and going, and having some good conversation, good guests, and a lot of exciting things happening this year, not only for us and what we've been developing, but also for Turn Down with some of the guests we have coming soon. So,
Yeah. Thanks everyone for listening. It's been a great year.
thank you very
absolutely.
much.
Here's to 2024.
Hey.
2024.
Everybody. See you next week.